Why is it that people only begin to truly feel your presence the moment you're no longer there? Not when you gave them your time, not when you reached out, stayed consistent, showed them care, attention, love, but the moment you go quiet, that's when something changes. That's when the silence hits them harder than anything you ever said. It's strange. You were once easy to reach, always there, always showing up. But the second you take a step back, no words, no drama, no explanation, suddenly you're the only thought circling their mind. And that's not by accident. That's not mystery. That's not some dating tactic. That is the quiet power of emotional detachment. They feel it because your energy is no longer being offered on a silver platter. It's like this. When the sun is always shining, nobody looks up. But the second it disappears and the cold creeps in, everyone starts to miss the warmth they once took for granted. You were the warmth. But they only learned that when you became the cold silence. You didn't yell, you didn't argue, you didn't chase, you just stopped. You pulled your energy back. And that kind of silence, that kind of inner control, it's louder than any words you could have spoken. That's what true power looks like. It doesn't make a scene, it makes a void. And that void, that's what they feel. This isn't about playing games. This is about respecting yourself enough to walk away when you're being taken for granted. It's about choosing peace over proving your point. It's about shifting the dynamic, not with force, but with stillness. The same way deep water looks calm on the surface, but underneath it has depth and strength most people can't even handle. When you master this kind of silence, the kind rooted in dignity, not bitterness, they start to feel your absence in ways they never expected. Their mind begins to wander. Did you stop caring? Are you done? Are you with someone else now? Did they lose you and not even realize it at the time? These questions hit harder than any text you could have sent. And the more they think, the more they feel. Because silence creates space. And space gives them nothing to hold on to but their own thoughts. Most people react when they feel ignored. They panic. They try harder. They send long messages, ask for closure, beg to be seen. But that's not you anymore. You've grown past that. You've tapped into something deeper. The philosophy of Stoic strength. The art of not responding. The discipline to hold your energy in, instead of wasting it on people who don't value it. You're not ignoring them out of hate. You're detaching out of clarity. You're not cold. You're composed. And that kind of presence or absence changes everything. In this video, we'll break down exactly why the more you ignore them, the more they feel it. Not because you're punishing them, but because you're no longer available for emotional games. You're no longer reacting. And when you stop reacting, they finally start to wake up. Let's begin. 1. Play harder to get. Win bigger in silence. Why does giving less attention make them want you more? Why does pulling back create more attraction than pouring your heart out ever could? The answer is simple. We don't chase what's always there. We chase what we might lose. This is human nature. The more available something is, the less we value it. It's the law of supply and demand, not just in economics, but in emotions. When you're always texting, always calling, always around, your presence becomes background noise, predictable, safe, easy. And what's easy is often ignored. But the second you step back, everything changes. Now your silence isn't just silence, it's a signal. Now your absence isn't just empty space, it's pressure. They start to notice that the energy they once had access to is no longer there, and that absence speaks louder than words. It whispers, "You had something valuable, and you didn't notice until it was gone." Think of it like a candle in a dark room. When it's burning, no one says much. But when it goes out, the darkness suddenly becomes overwhelming. That's what your attention was. Warmth, light, presence. But now it's missing, and they feel it. We often only recognize value in its absence. Epictetus. A person who truly knows their worth doesn't beg to be seen. They don't scream for attention. They simply remove their presence and let that silence do all the talking. That's not playing games. That's emotional discipline. You might ask, but if I don't reach out, won't they forget me? Number. They forget what's loud and constant, but they remember what disappears quietly, because silence creates curiosity. It forces them to ask questions they never had to before. Why did you stop? Are you losing interest? Are they moving on? Who are they giving their energy to now? Those thoughts don't come when you're always chasing. They only come when you stop. Marcus Aurelius said, "The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts." When your thoughts are consumed by how to win them over, how to make them like you more, how to get a response, your energy becomes desperate. You lose your center. You become a chaser instead of a chooser. But when your thoughts are focused inward, on growth, peace, purpose, your energy shifts. You're no longer asking, "How do I get them to want me?" You're now asking, "Do they even deserve me?" And that energy, that calm, detached, centered energy, that's magnetic. They feel the pull, not because you're trying to be mysterious, but because you are mysterious now. You're focused, you're building. You're not sitting around waiting for validation. You're moving, and if they want to be part of your world, they'll have to keep up. Let's say someone was texting you every day, complimenting you, always available. At first it feels nice, but over time it fades into the background. It loses edge. It loses mystery. Now imagine that same person suddenly goes quiet. They're not angry. They're not ghosting. They're just gone, working on their own life. You'd feel that. You'd notice the shift. And whether you admit it or not, you'd wonder, did I lose something important? That's the power of restraint. That's the strength of detachment. A Stoic doesn't pull away to manipulate. They pull away to protect peace. They know that love built on constant chasing is not real love. It's dependency, and they refuse to live like that. So next time you feel like you have to prove your worth through more attention, pause, pull back, focus on you. Let them experience the weight of your absence. If they care, they'll come closer. If they don't, you just made space for someone who will. 2. Silence hits harder than words. Silence, when used with strength, speaks louder than any speech, any argument, any explanation, especially when they're used to your presence, when they're used to the good morning texts, the late night replies, the little check-ins that showed you cared. That constant attention becomes a kind of comfort, a background hum. But the moment you stop, everything shifts. Now, there's space. Now, there's uncertainty. Now, they feel what they never had to question before: your absence. You see, when something is always there, it's taken for granted. That's not malice. That's just human nature. A chair in the room, a light in the hallway, a voice in the crowd. If it's always there, it becomes invisible. But the second it's gone, you notice. You feel the weight of the missing. The comfort that once felt normal is suddenly out of reach, and that quiet space where you once stood, it echoes. Never interrupt your enemy when they are making a mistake. Napoleon Bonaparte. But in this case, your silence isn't to defeat anyone. It's to remind them of what they forgot to appreciate. You're not going quiet to punish. You're going quiet to reset the balance, to protect your energy, to give them the one thing they didn't know they needed: distance. And you might ask, but won't they forget me? They don't forget the calm presence that used to be there, especially when that calm is suddenly gone. The silence does what words can't. It stirs their thoughts. It sparks curiosity. Why did they stop? Did I do something wrong? Have they moved on? Were they more valuable than I realized? These questions don't come when you're constantly available. They only come when you remove your presence and give them the time to feel it. Marcus Aurelius once said, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. You can't control how they feel. You can't make them miss you, but you can control what you do with your energy. You can control what you give, and when you stop giving. If the sun rose at midnight every night with no break, people would stop looking up. But when a storm clouds the sky for days, and the sun finally returns, people notice. They pause. They appreciate the warmth they once ignored. That's what silence does. It makes your presence valuable again. And it's not just about dating or attraction. This is a life principle, a lesson in Stoic restraint, in learning that you don't have to chase to be valued. You don't have to explain yourself to be understood. Sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is nothing at all. A person of worth doesn't panic in the silence. They find peace in it. They don't fill the gap with noise. They let the gap speak. Because in that space, your value echoes louder than any word. Silence is not emptiness. It's presence in a different form. It's the presence of self-respect, of boundaries, of calm confidence. And when they feel that silence, not the cold kind, but the grounded, composed kind, that's when the desire begins to grow. So, if they took your presence for granted, let them sit with your silence. If they overlooked your value, let the quiet show them what they missed. The ones meant for you will understand the message, and the ones who don't, let them drift. In a world full of noise, silence is the real test of power. 3. You don't know what you've got till it's gone. Attention is like oxygen, barely noticed when it's always there, but painfully missed the moment it disappears. People don't always realize how much they relied on your presence until it vanishes. It's not always instant. Sometimes it creeps up on them. Days pass, and suddenly there's a quiet weight sitting in the room. That constant check-in, that warm message, that emotional support, it's missing. And the space you left behind, it starts to echo. This is one of life's strangest truths. The more consistent and predictable your attention is, the easier it is to take for granted. That's the hidden trap. You're there every day, showing up, giving your best, and they grow used to it. It becomes normal, expected. But the second you step back, something shifts. Now your absence speaks louder than any text, any phone call, any explanation. Because it's not just the silence they feel, it's the loss of energy. A steady presence they never had to ask for, now gone. They start to wonder. They feel the shift. Why did they stop reaching out? Did something change? Are they pulling away for good? And that wondering, it hits deeper than any words ever could, because it forces them to think, to question, to feel, not because you played a game, but because you finally pulled your attention inward, toward your peace, toward your purpose, toward your life. Wealth consists not in having great possessions, but in having few wants. Epictetus. Apply that to relationships, and you'll understand this. The less you need their attention, the more power you hold. The moment your peace becomes more important than their validation, you reclaim yourself. You stop chasing. You stop begging. You stop performing. People feel the weight of your withdrawal when your presence used to feel effortless, like gravity, always there, holding things in place. But when you remove that gravity, things shift, things fall, and sometimes that's what it takes for them to notice the force you actually were. You might ask, but what if they never notice? What if they don't care? Then you've saved yourself. You've protected your time, your energy, your mind. You've created space for someone who will notice, someone who won't wait for your absence to feel your value. Think about it. If someone always picks up your calls, always replies first, always asks how you're doing, you might appreciate it at first, but over time it blends into the background. It becomes the norm. But now imagine that same presence disappears. No arguments, no goodbye, just silence. You'd feel that. You'd think about it. And whether or not you say it, you'd wonder, what changed? That's the power of being intentional with your energy. A person of value doesn't overextend. They don't throw their attention at people who don't respect it. They move with discipline, quietly, strongly. Stoicism teaches us this form of control, not over others, but over ourselves. You don't need to explain your silence. You don't need to announce your absence. Just leave the space. Let them feel the contrast, because sometimes your distance is the only truth they'll believe. And if that silence brings them closer, good. If it doesn't, you've just learned something even better. So remember, your attention is your currency. Don't spend it where it's not valued. When your words stop being heard, let your silence echo, because in that stillness, they'll either hear what they missed, or you'll hear yourself more clearly than ever before. 4. Let them come to you. Something strange happens when you stop chasing. They start. Not right away, not in an obvious way, but slowly, subtly, something shifts. They begin to notice your silence. They begin to feel your absence. And that space you leave behind, it starts pulling them in like gravity. Why? Because humans are wired to want what they can't fully have. That's the paradox of desire. When you're always there, always available, always reaching out, you're already in their hands. There's no tension, no mystery, no edge. But when you pull back, when your attention is no longer guaranteed, the mind begins to wander. Now they're questioning, overthinking, replaying. Why aren't you reaching out? Did something change? Are you over it? And those questions, they create tension, and tension creates attraction. We are more often frightened than hurt, and we suffer more from imagination than from reality. Seneca. And that's exactly what your absence does. It leaves room for their imagination to do the work. You didn't say anything. You didn't send a cold message or deliver some dramatic goodbye. You simply stopped. You shifted your energy inward, toward your peace, your path, your priorities. And in that silence, their mind filled the gap. They check their phone more often now, scroll back through old conversations. They second-guess that last moment between you, that last message. What you once gave freely, they now begin to miss. Because it's no longer predictable, it's no longer easy, and suddenly, it's valuable. This is the pull of tension, not manipulation, not games, just nature. We all want what feels rare. We all crave what we're not sure we can have. And when you stop chasing, you become exactly that. You might ask, but isn't it cold to pull back like this? What's cold is pouring your soul into someone who isn't pouring back. What's unwise is chasing someone who only looks your way when it's convenient. Stoicism teaches restraint. It teaches power over impulse. As Seneca put it, he who is everywhere is nowhere. If your energy is scattered, constantly flowing toward people who don't match it, you lose your center. But when you redirect that energy inward, you become unshakable. You don't panic when someone pulls away. You don't flood their phone. You don't beg to be seen. Because you're already focused on your mission, you've replaced their validation with your own growth. You've chosen presence over pursuit. That's when the dynamic changes. They're no longer certain of where they stand with you. And uncertainty, when paired with emotional distance, is what wakes people up. Now they start adjusting to your absence, instead of you constantly adjusting to their moods, their schedule, their effort. And that's the secret. People value what they work for. When your attention becomes something to earn, not something handed out for free, they treat it differently. They stop expecting it. They start chasing it. You don't attract by force. You attract by holding your ground. You don't earn respect through overexposure. You earn it through restraint, through purpose, through silence. You become magnetic, not because you try to be, but because you're centered in who you are. So next time you feel the pull to reach out first, to over-explain, to fight for attention, pause. Let them come to you, because if they truly care, they will. And if they don't, you've just reclaimed the time and energy you were about to waste. Let your absence teach them what your words never could. 5. Stop gassing up their ego. There comes a point where your constant attention doesn't feel like love. It feels like fuel for their ego. You text, you compliment, you chase, and for a while they enjoy it. Not because they truly desire you, but because they enjoy being desired. You become a mirror, reflecting back everything they want to see in themselves. But here's the twist. Just because someone loves attention doesn't mean they love you. That's the trap. Most people don't even realize it's happening. They think the more effort they give, the more value they show. But it backfires, because the more available you are, the less you're noticed. The more you give, the more they expect. And eventually, your presence stops being appreciated. It becomes assumed. But the moment you stop feeding the ego, the moment you go quiet, stop checking in, stop being that steady supply of validation, something shifts, silence creeps in, and now they feel it. Not because you said anything, not because you created drama, but because the flow of attention they once took for granted has stopped. Now their mind starts doing the work. Why aren't they texting? Did I say something wrong? Are they seeing someone else? And just like that, the dynamic flips. You're no longer the chaser. You've become the mystery. And mystery is powerful. Freedom is the only worthy goal in life. It is won by disregarding things that lie beyond our control. Epictetus. You can't force someone to care. You can't force desire. But you can control how much of yourself you give away, and giving yourself endlessly to someone who hasn't earned it. That's emotional poverty. So instead of feeding their ego, feed your purpose. Turn the focus inward. Let them wonder for once. Let them feel what it's like when the attention stops, when the energy disappears. If they value it, they'll feel the loss. If they don't, then your silence just saved you from wasting even more. It's like a fire. If you smother it with too much oxygen, it dies out. But if you give it just the right amount of space, it burns hotter. Same goes for attraction. Overfeed it, and it suffocates. But step back, and suddenly there's space for curiosity, tension, longing. That's where desire grows. You might be thinking, but if I don't show I care, won't they forget about me? Number. They forget what's always there. They remember what disappears. That absence, especially when it's calm and confident, lingers longer than any message ever could. A person who knows their worth doesn't throw themselves into every conversation, every interaction, hoping to be seen. They move with purpose. They're present when it matters and silent when it doesn't. And that silence, that quiet withdrawal, it's not a game, it's a statement. You don't need to chase someone to prove your value. If they can't see it when you're standing still, they'll never appreciate it when you're running after them. So the next time you feel the urge to text first, to double message, to explain yourself, pause. Let your absence speak. Let the silence do what your words can't. Because if they really care, they'll feel it. And if they don't, then you've just stopped feeding the wrong fire. 6. Silence makes them rewind the tape. There's something haunting about silence, not the kind that comes from distance, but the kind that comes from closure without explanation. When you walk away calmly, without anger or bitterness, and without a dramatic goodbye, it leaves a gap, a question mark. And the mind hates unfinished stories. Suddenly, they start replaying everything, not just the good parts, not just the laughs, but the way things were said, the last few texts, the shift in your tone, the small signs they overlooked. What once felt predictable now feels uncertain. What they once ignored is now the only thing they can't stop thinking about. The best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury. Marcus Aurelius. The best response, not to react, not to fight, not to prove, but to become silent. You were always there, consistent, present, reliable, and maybe that presence became invisible to them, like a favorite song playing in the background, always there, always comforting, but never noticed, until one day it stops. And now the silence isn't peaceful. It's loud. It echoes. It makes them uncomfortable, because it's not just about you being gone. It's about what your presence used to mean. That's when the questions start. Did I mess this up? Did I misread their effort? Were they more valuable than I gave credit for? And the more they think, the more the silence grows. You're no longer just someone they used to talk to. You've become an unresolved thought, a ghost in their mind. And unlike a memory that fades, this kind of thought lingers. You might wonder, but what if they don't reflect? What if they move on? If they do, then your silence saved you. It revealed the truth. If someone can walk away from you without reflection, without regret, then they were never truly connected in the first place. And if they do reflect, then you didn't need to chase. You didn't need to beg. You simply had to let your absence do the work. That's the strength of emotional discipline, something the Stoics lived by. You control what's in your hands, your thoughts, your behavior, your energy. You let go of what isn't, their reactions, their realizations, their timing. A person who masters this kind of restraint becomes powerful without ever raising their voice. They create tension without saying a word. Desperation never attracts, it repels. You don't need to convince anyone to value you. You don't need to explain why you mattered. People know what they've lost. Sometimes they just need time and silence to feel it. So you step back, you stop giving, you disappear, not to hurt them, but to protect yourself. You become the song they forgot to appreciate until it stops playing. And in that space, if they truly valued you, they'll feel the loss. They'll reflect. They'll regret. Not because you forced them to, but because you left room for it to happen. And if they don't, then you've walked away from something that was already empty. Either way, you win, because silence has a way of showing you what words never could. And when you stop trying to be heard, that's often when they finally start listening. 7. Stand alone, and they'll follow. Nothing repels like neediness. And it's not just about the chasing. It's about what the chasing says underneath the surface. When you're always the one initiating, texting first, waiting for a reply like your worth depends on it, what you're really saying is this: I'm not enough unless you choose me. And the moment that energy seeps in, attraction starts to rot. People don't desire what's always begging to be wanted. They're drawn to what feels sure of itself, calm, grounded, and whole. True attraction isn't built on constant availability. It's built on quiet value, the kind that doesn't shout, doesn't chase, doesn't need applause to feel complete. No man is free who is not master of himself. Epictetus. That's the Stoics' definition of strength, and in this context, it couldn't be more true. When you let desire take over, when you let anxiety run the show, you're no longer in control. You're acting from emotion, not intention. But the moment you stand still, centered in your own worth, everything changes. You might wonder, but if I don't chase, won't they think I don't care? What they'll feel is that you care more about your peace than their approval. And that's powerful. That's what flips the script. Because now instead of you trying to prove yourself to them, they begin questioning what makes you so composed, so unavailable, so complete. That's where the attraction builds, not in the noise, but in the pause, not in proving, but in simply being. Think of it like this. Imagine two people. One is constantly on edge, always refreshing their phone, trying to decode every message, wondering what to say to be liked. The other, they're focused on their craft, on their purpose, on their day. They don't ignore anyone, but they respond on their time from a place of clarity, not anxiety. One is chasing, the other is choosing. Which one draws more attention? It's not the one pouring out effort. It's the one holding his frame. Because confidence doesn't come from being liked. It comes from knowing deeply that you are enough, even if no one claps for you. The independent person doesn't crave validation. They don't fall apart in silence. They don't chase people who run. And that stillness, that emotional regulation, it creates space. Space for curiosity, space for attraction, space for the other person to lean in, not because you begged, but because your absence made them wonder. He who is not contented with what he has would not be contented with what he would like to have. Socrates. Neediness says, I need something outside of me to feel whole. Independence says, I am already enough. And when you start living that truth, not performing it, but truly believing it, you stop chasing. And strangely, that's when others start chasing you. Because you no longer radiate desperation. You radiate peace, strength, value. You're not trying to be chosen. You've already chosen yourself. And the world notices. So stop explaining, stop proving, stop running after people who don't see your worth. Sit in silence, walk your path, stand alone, and you'll see, the less you need attention, the more it finds you. 8. Keep them guessing, keep them hooked. Predictability is the slow death of desire. The more someone knows exactly what you're going to say, when you're going to say it, and how you'll respond, the less they feel the need to think about you. And once that happens, the mystery is gone. The excitement fades. You become routine, safe, expected, and nothing about that feels magnetic. But the moment you stop being predictable, the moment you pull back, pause, and move differently, something shifts. Suddenly, they're the one doing the wondering. Why haven't they texted? Did I do something wrong? Have they lost interest? These questions don't come from drama. They come from distance. And that distance, that uncertainty, that's where attraction begins to rise. We're wired to chase what feels just out of reach. Not too far, not impossible, just uncertain enough to feel valuable. Human nature craves novelty, and novelty lives in mystery. When your every move is known, when your attention is guaranteed, when your presence is predictable, you become easy to figure out. And what's easy to figure out is rarely desired for long. But the disciplined person, the one who doesn't over-explain, the one who doesn't react the same way every time, the one who stays calm, focused, and intentional, they're the one people can't stop thinking about. Not because they're playing games, but because they're not stuck in patterns. They move with purpose, not permission. A real man doesn't give way to anger and discontent, and such a person has strength, courage, and endurance. Marcus Aurelius. Now apply that to attraction. When you don't give in to every impulse, to text first, to always explain yourself, to always be available, you create space. You create curiosity. You become unpredictable in a world full of repetition. And that unpredictability, that's what makes you irresistible. Imagine two people. One always texts first, never breaks pattern, and lives in a loop of predictable effort. The other is focused on their goals, busy building their life, and responds with intention, not insecurity. Which one feels more powerful? Which one feels more attractive? It's not the one clinging to routine. It's the one who keeps others guessing, not because they're trying to, but because they're too grounded in their own mission to need external validation. You might ask, but what if they think I don't care? If someone can't handle your silence without spiraling, they were addicted to your attention, not connected to your essence. Real connection survives stillness. And real desire often starts there. The truth is, you don't need to be distant to create mystery. You just need to stop being predictable. Be warm, but not always available. Be present, but not always responding on cue. Speak when you have something to say, not just to fill space. When you stop moving in ways they expect, they start leaning in. They start watching more closely. They start wondering what you're thinking, where you've gone, what you're doing, and that curiosity builds tension. And tension is the fire that keeps desire alive. So keep them guessing, not by faking mystery, but by being someone so full of life, purpose, and direction that you don't have time to perform for attention. Let them wonder. Let them think. Let your unpredictability be the spark they never saw coming. Because once you become someone they can't read like a book, they'll never want to stop turning the pages. 9. Take the spotlight away. Watch what happens. When someone is used to attention, its absence doesn't go unnoticed. It stings. Whether it's likes on social media, compliments in passing, or people constantly trying to win their favor, most people rarely experience true silence. So when they realize that your attention, the one they assumed would always be there, has gone quiet, something shifts inside them. Not necessarily in the heart, but in the ego. Suddenly, they're not thinking about how much they miss you. They're thinking about why they're no longer being pursued, why the energy they once relied on for comfort and power has vanished. It's not always about affection. Often it's about control, about confidence, about the silent hit their ego just took when you decided to stop feeding it. If someone handed your body over to a stranger, you'd be outraged, but you let others disturb your mind. Have you no shame? Epictetus. It's the same in relationships. The moment you let someone else's validation steer your behavior, you've already surrendered your inner power. But when you take a step back, calmly, silently, you shake something they didn't even realize was fragile. Their sense of importance, their certainty in your attention. Now they're asking themselves, why did the energy change? Did I misread the situation? Have they found someone else? Did I lose something I didn't even know I had? These questions don't come from affection. They come from disorientation, from no longer feeling in control of the story. You've flipped the script without saying a word, and now they're stuck wondering whether they were mistaken, or if maybe, just maybe, you were never as easy to figure out as they thought. This isn't manipulation, it's clarity. A Stoic doesn't fight for control. They simply remove themselves from situations that don't honor their value. They don't chase, they don't explain. They position, they hold their ground and let others feel what life is like without their presence. And that absence, if genuine, if rooted in strength, is often the loudest sound in the room. Imagine two people. One constantly tries to prove themselves, always reaching out, always trying to be seen, always dancing for approval. The other says less, does less, but moves with calm intention. One blends in, the other stands out, because stillness is rare, and rare is memorable. You might ask, but what if they don't care at all? That's the gift. If silence doesn't make them pause, they were never listening to begin with. And if your absence doesn't move them, your presence never mattered to them in the first place. Either way, you learn. And you gain back something priceless, your focus. You don't need to spark jealousy, create drama, or pretend to be cold. You simply stop handing out your energy like it's free. You stop offering your attention like it costs you nothing, because it does cost something. Your time, your peace, your identity. And once they feel the void, not just any void, but your specific silence, something hits. Maybe it's confusion, maybe it's regret, maybe it's a bruised ego. Whatever it is, it makes them think, not because you begged for their thoughts, but because you walked away without asking for theirs. In the end, the one who holds their frame, who doesn't explain their worth, who stays grounded even in the face of rejection. That's the one who lingers, not in desperation, but in mystery, not in their hands, but in their mind. So let them feel the silence. Let their ego wrestle with it. If they come back, they'll come differently. And if they don't, now you know just how much they never saw you to begin with. 10. Let distance do the talking. Distance doesn't just create space, it creates reflection. When you stop calling, stop texting, stop showing up like you used to, something begins to stir in the silence. It's not just about where you went. It's about what your presence once meant, and what your absence now reveals. They begin to remember, not the big moments, but the little ones, the sound of your voice, the calm energy you brought into a room, the way your presence made chaos feel quiet. The small things that once blended into the background suddenly come rushing back in your absence. It's strange how people don't often notice peace until it's gone. You might think, won't they just forget me if I disappear? But memory doesn't work that way. When something becomes rare, it becomes valuable. When someone disappears with grace, not with resentment, not with drama, they don't vanish. They echo, and that echo lingers louder than noise ever could. The things you think about determine the quality of your mind. Marcus Aurelius. When you're always around, your presence fades into routine. When you take a step back, you stop being background noise. You become a moment, a memory, a mystery. You shift from predictable to unforgettable. It's like a favorite song. When you hear it every single day, you stop feeling it. You hum it without listening. But when you hear it again after weeks of silence, something hits. Nostalgia, emotion, longing. That's what distance does. It strips away the familiarity and brings back the feeling. This is what the wise understand. You don't chase what's walking away. You don't beg to be seen. You don't force someone to realize your value. You give them time, space, silence. Not because you're playing games, because you respect yourself enough to stop overgiving where it's not received. And if they truly valued what you brought into their life, they'll feel it. Not always immediately. Sometimes it takes days, sometimes months. But at some point, they'll stop and notice. The energy is different. Something's missing. The comfort, the connection, the clarity. It's no longer there. And that's when desire often returns. He who learns to walk away learns to be chased. Unknown, because chasing creates pressure, but silence, it creates tension. And tension, when rooted in calm self-respect, draws people in. It lets them reflect on what they once had without interruption, without distraction. And in that reflection, realization begins. You don't need to remind someone of your value with words. Let absence reveal it. Let distance sharpen what time has softened. Let them feel what life is like without your energy, not out of revenge, but out of quiet wisdom. Because if they never look back, if the silence doesn't make them feel a thing, then you never had anything worth holding on to in the first place. And that too is clarity. But if they do look back, if the nostalgia creeps in, if the memories start to hit differently, then it wasn't about playing hard to get. It was about giving them the gift of missing you. And sometimes that's all it takes. So let distance do what presence can't. Let the silence say what your words no longer need to. Because the version of you they once had, the one that brought peace, strength, warmth, That version wasn't so easy to replace. And when they finally realize that, your silence will be louder than any message you could ever send.